The rain had been falling for 6 hours when Soren first noticed her. He was running the nightly perimeter check on the outer fence of settlement Verada 9, a job that no one else wanted because it involved walking 3 kilometers of reactive barrier in the dark with a scanner that beeped at ghosts when the motion sensor on Gate 7 tripped. Gate 7 was the easternmost entry point of the settlement, a heavy pneumatic affair that hadn't been used since the ore freighters stopped coming through that corridor 18 months ago. There was nothing east of Gate 7 except the Black Meridian Badlands, and beyond that, the outer edge of the Dominion exclusion zone. Nothing came from the east anymore. Except she had. Soren slowed as he rounded the last berm, scanner in hand, expecting a debris ghost or a wind-driven piece of shrapnel. What he found instead was a figure crumpled against the base of the gate, half submerged in the muddy runoff channel that collected rainwater from the eastern facing. She was large, even folded in on herself the way she was, and the mottled gray-green of her skin was unmistakable even in the poor light of his lamp. Orc. Alone. Unconscious or something close to it. No weapons visible. No armor beyond a single tattered pauldron still strapped to her left shoulder, its clan markings ground down to near illegibility. He stood there for exactly 4 seconds. He counted them later, because he remembered counting them in the moment, the way you remember small details that turn out to be hinges. Then he crouched down and put 2 fingers against the side of her neck, where he knew orc pulse points ran slightly lower than on a human. She was alive, barely. He keyed his comm. Soren to Central, I need a medical cart at Gate 7. Bring warming blankets. A pause, then the night supervisor's voice flat and half asleep. Gate 7, there's nothing out there, Soren. There is now, he said, move quick. Her name, as near as he could reconstruct it from the fragments she offered over the following 3 days, was something closer to a sound than a word, a low, sustained consonant that the human vocal architecture couldn't quite reach. The settlement's translation matrix rendered it as Kira, which was close enough that she didn't correct it, and Soren took that as consent. She had come from the east. She had been walking, or trying to walk, for at least 4 days without food or fresh water. Her body was in the extraordinary shape that orc physiology tended toward even under deprivation. All of them were built for endurance that would have destroyed a human twice over, but even she had limits, and the rain had pushed her to them. The medical team stabilized her without drama. Dr. Vesa, who had done 2 rotations on an orc-adjacent refugee processing facility near the Keth corridor, handled the biochemical protocols with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen worse. The settlement director, a thin, bureaucratic man named Calloway, came and stood in the doorway of the medical bay for about 90 seconds before asking Soren whether this was going to create any paperwork. Probably, Soren said. Calloway left without further comment. Kira did not speak for the first 2 days. She lay in the medical bay with her eyes open, tracking movement in the room with the absolute stillness of something that had learned very early in life that stillness was survival. Soren came by twice a day, once in the morning before his shift, once in the evening after, not because it was his job, because it emphatically was not his job, but because something about the way she'd been lying in that rain channel sat in him like a splinter he couldn't work free. He brought things. That was how he handled awkward silences generally. He filled them with tasks. The first morning he brought a clean thermal blanket. The second he brought a meal pack rated for high-protein nutritional needs, which was the closest thing the commissary had to an orc dietary profile. He set these things down without fanfare and sat in the chair near the wall, running diagnostic notes on his handheld, not looking at her unless she seemed to want to be looked at. On the 3rd morning she spoke. Why, she said. Her standard was accented strangely, the consonants blunted, the vowels longer than they needed to be. But it was intelligible. Why what? Soren asked. She gestured at herself, at the room, at him. A comprehensive gesture. You needed help, he said. It was raining. A long silence. Outside, The settlement was running through its morning routines, the drone of equipment coming online, the clatter of the Eastern processing units cycling up, the indifferent hum of a place that was not particularly interested in its own inhabitants as long as the work got done. Other humans, she said carefully, have not a pause. She seemed to be choosing between available words. Carried, she finally said. Other humans aren't me, Soren said, and went back to his diagnostics. Her file, when it came through from the Interstellar Resettlement Bureau 4 days after her arrival, was 14 pages of administrative language that translated to, "We don't know what to do with her." She was listed as a non-combat Orc refugee from the Verada Collective, one of the 3 Orc nation clusters that had been in the path of the Dominion's Neural Purge campaign the previous winter. Her pack bond status was listed as severed, which, Soren learned from Dr. Vesa, was the bureaucratic equivalent of noting that someone had lost both parents, their entire extended family, their native language, and their sense of self in a single event, all at once. The Dominion's anomaly weapon didn't kill Orcs. It did something worse. They designed it specifically, Vesa told him one evening, leaning against the wall outside the med bay with a cup of something hot that wasn't quite coffee. Orc memory is biological. You know that, right? It's not metaphor. Their identity, their social architecture, their ability to form bonds, it's encoded in the pack song, the collective memory that a clan maintains together. The anomaly weapon targeted the neurotransmitter clusters that receive and transmit pack song. When it fired, every Orc within range lost that capacity. Not the memories themselves, not entirely, but the ability to access them, to share them, to feel them as real. She paused. They can still technically remember. Like reading words without understanding what they mean. How many? Soren asked. In the Verada Collective alone, about 60,000. He stood with that number for a while. 60,000 people who could describe their own lives in clinical terms, but could not feel that those lives had been theirs. Kira was one of 60,000, and she had walked 4 days through the Meridian Badlands alone to reach a human settlement that had no particular reason to want her. He went back inside and asked her if she was sleeping all right. "The dreams are different now," she said. Her voice was getting easier. She used standard the way someone uses a borrowed coat, technically functional, slightly wrong in the fit but making it work. "Before I dreamed in pack song, colors, sounds, the feeling of others. Now I dream only in pictures, still pictures, like, what is the word, like photographs. I know what photographs are." "I know that you know," she said. "I was checking if you were paying attention." He smiled before he could stop himself. She watched the smile with something careful in her expression, the way someone watches an unfamiliar animal to determine whether it bites. The settlement had rules about Orc refugees. All frontier settlements did, not because of any formal legislation. The Interstellar Resettlement Accord technically prohibited Orc-specific restrictions, but because frontier settlements had rules about everything that varied from the norm, and Orcs varied from the norm in ways that made a certain category of person deeply uncomfortable. Director Calloway did not tell Kira she couldn't move freely through the settlement. He told her she would need an escort in shared spaces until her paperwork cleared. He told Soren this in the tone of a man who considered the problem solved. Soren became the escort. This was not, technically, in his job description as a maintenance engineer. His job description involved reactive barrier systems, power grid maintenance, and the occasional water reclamation repair that somehow always fell to him, despite the fact that there were 3 designated water technicians on the roster. But Calloway seemed to feel that having assigned the escort obligation, he was done with the matter, and the settlement's social coordinator had taken medical leave 2 weeks prior and hadn't been replaced. And so, by default, the task landed on the only person who had voluntarily been visiting the medical bay twice a day since the Orc arrived. The first time Soren escorted Kira through the main corridor of the settlement, the silence was architectural. People did not move away. They didn't shout or make gestures. They simply went still in that particular way that human beings go still when they are very carefully not reacting to something, which is one of the loudest kinds of silence there is. Kira walked through it without apparent notice. Her posture was controlled, her pace measured. She was wearing civilian clothes that the settlement supply coordinator had sourced from the communal clothing stores, the largest available items, which still fit her poorly, the sleeves too short, the shoulders straining. She had restrapped the tattered pauldron over the top of the borrowed shirt with a length of cable she'd asked Soren for the previous evening, and he had given it to her without asking why. He understood later. The pauldron was the only thing left from before that she could carry. "This is the commissary," he said as they passed it. "The food profiles here run mostly human standard, but the Eastern kitchen keeps broader inventory. I already put in a request to have the high-protein packs restocked." "You did that before I asked," she said. "You needed them." "Before I asked," she repeated, and it wasn't accusation. It was something she was turning over, the way you turn over an object you found that you don't yet have a category for. They went to the commissary, and she ate twice what a human would have and didn't apologize for it, which Soren respected. He ate his own meal quietly and told her about the settlement in the way he'd have briefed a new colleague, practical, non-condescending, the information you'd actually need to navigate. Water recycling was on a 12-hour delay, so showers in the morning were better than evenings. The eastern corridor got cold at night because the insulation panels on sections E7 through E14 were on his repair list and had been for 6 months, and administration had not approved the materials order yet. The commissary coffee was technically coffee in the same way that a photograph of a mountain was technically a mountain. She laughed at that last one, a short sound low that she seemed surprised to have made. "My pack elder said something like that once," she said, "about memory. That a memory of a thing and the thing itself, they are related, but the relationship can be broken." A pause stretched between them. "His name was Verk," she said. "He was the oldest of the Veradiketh branch. He had fought in the Third Expansion War and the border skirmishes and the long silence, and he had never been wounded badly enough to leave a permanent scar, and he was very proud of that. After the anomaly weapon fired," she stopped. "He would talk about himself, past tense, not I remember when, but Verk once did this thing. As if the man he was describing were someone else. He died 4 months after. Not from any injury, he simply," another pause longer, "he forgot how to be continuous." Soren didn't say anything, because there was nothing useful to say. He refilled her water without making it a gesture. What he learned about her over the following weeks came in pieces, and he began to understand that this was intentional, not because she was withholding, but because she was rebuilding. The anomaly weapon had not erased her memories, but it had severed the feeling that they were hers. She would tell him a thing about herself, and then she would wait, watching him, in a way that he eventually worked out was an old orc ritual. In pack culture, memories were validated by witness. You did not truly remember something unless another person heard the memory and confirmed it. The pack song had done this automatically, unconsciously, the way breathing happens. Now, with the song severed, the only way Kira could make a memory feel real again was to speak it aloud to someone who paid attention. Soren paid attention. This was not a strategy on his part. It was just how he was built. His mother had called it his listening face, a stillness and a focus that made people tell him things they hadn't planned to tell anyone. His crew chief at his first job had called it an engineering mind, the ability to be fully present with a problem until you understood it. Kira seemed to experience it as something else, something older, more needed. She told him about the Verada Collective's territory, a stretch of plains and low mountain ranges that had no analog in standard stellar cartography, because Orc nations didn't file territorial maps with galactic bodies. She described the color of the sky at the border between the plains and the mountains, which was a specific shade of amber that only appeared for about 20 minutes in the late afternoon, when the light came through the mineral dust that the wind picked up from the eastern flats. She described the pack run, the communal movement of the clan at dawn, when every member moved together through their territory in a loose formation that was not quite a march and not quite a dance, each person's pace adjusting minutely to the people around them, the whole thing flowing like water in a channel. She had been the one to call the pace in the last 3 years before the weapon fired. She had a gift for it, she said, for feeling where everyone was and how they were moving and what the morning's energy needed to be. That's remarkable, Soren said. It is ordinary, she said. Was ordinary, she paused. I cannot tell any more whether I am describing something that was mine or something I have read about somewhere. That is the worst part, not the forgetting. The doubt. He thought about that for a long time, about what it would mean to hold a memory and not be able to trust that it belonged to you, to feel the ghost of a life without the certainty that it was the right ghost. I believe you, he said finally. The pack run, the amber sky, Verk, I believe those were yours. She was quiet for a moment. You cannot know that, she said. No, he agreed, but you know what I mean. She looked at him with those dark amber eyes that were the exact color she described in the Verada sky. Yes, she said quietly, I do. The trouble started on a Thursday, because trouble in frontier settlements always started on a Thursday. Thursdays were the end of the work week, the point where exhaustion and social friction had been accumulating since Monday and had run out of places to go. Soren was 3/4 of the way through a repair job on the water reclamation input in the Eastern Corridor when he heard the noise from the direction of the commissary. The noise was the specific quality that comes from a small group of people who have decided to make a point. There were 4 of them, 3 men and a woman, all ore processing crew, the kind of people who worked hard and long and had a very clear internal map of what belonged in their world and what didn't. They had cornered Kira near the eastern kitchen counter. Not physically, they hadn't touched her, but in the way that 4 people arranged in a semicircle around one person constitutes a kind of violence even without contact. We're not saying anything against the Accord, the tallest one was saying. He had a miner's build and the flat, careful tone of someone who has rehearsed this. We're saying this is a working settlement, not a refugee camp. There are proper facilities for. She has proper paperwork, Soren said. He was standing in the doorway with his repair kit still in hand. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. Something about his presence in that doorway, the stillness, the directness, had the effect of a much louder interruption. Cleared by the IRB. Director Calloway has a copy. I can get you the reference number if you want to file a formal complaint through the Settlement Council. The tall man looked at him, then at Kira, then back at Soren. This isn't your business, Soren. Sure it is, Soren said. She's under my escort authorization. Anything that happens to her is my paperwork. Silence, the kind with weight in it. The group dispersed, not because they were convinced, not because anything had fundamentally changed in their thinking, but because making a point requires an audience that's paying the right kind of attention, and Soren had changed the kind of attention in the room. After they were gone, Kira stood at the kitchen counter for a moment. Then she put both palms flat on the counter surface, fingers spread wide, an orc grounding gesture that Soren had looked up after seeing her do it once before. It was what you did when the pack song would normally carry excess emotion away, and there was no pack song to carry it. I have been in 12 human settlements, she said. Since the weapon, 12. The Bureau sends you to a processing facility, then to a transit hub, then to an available settlement on the frontier list, and you stay until the paperwork tells you where to go next. Her voice was level. 8 of the 12 were like this, some worse. What happened at the worst one? They did not carry me, she said, when I needed it. He stood with the weight of that and didn't try to make it lighter. There was paperwork that came from the Settlement Council 2 weeks after the commissary incident. It was addressed to Director Calloway, with a copy to the Settlement Security Coordinator, and it requested that Calloway revisit the terms of Kira's provisional residency given certain concerns raised by long-term residents. The language was careful, procedural, and completely unambiguous about what it was asking. Soren read his copy in his quarters that evening. He sat with it for a while. Then he went to his desk and pulled up the Interstellar Resettlement Accord, which he had not previously read in full, and spent 2 hours reading it in full. The next morning, he requested a meeting with Calloway. Calloway's office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who treated settlement administration as a series of problems to be closed out. Clean desk, organized files, the framed settlement charter above the door as a gesture toward the idea of purpose. He had the petition from the council waiting on his screen when Soren sat down. "I know why you're here," Calloway said. "Article 14, Section 3 of the Resettlement Accord," Soren said. "Provisional refugees who have been granted medical shelter cannot have their residency reviewed by local settlement councils, only by Accord-certified IRB officers. The petition is invalid on its face." Calloway looked at him steadily. "The council is aware there are ways to file this through the IRB." "The IRB has a 17-month backlog," Soren said. "If Kira gets flagged for a formal review, she goes back into the transit system for the duration, which means—" He stopped. He thought about Verk, about a man who forgot how to be continuous. "It means she loses the only stable context she's had since the weapon fired, and I'd like to not let that happen." A long pause. "You've gotten attached," Calloway said, not unkindly, more like a man noting a variable that complicates his calculation. "She came through Gate 7 in the rain," Soren said. "She needed help, I helped. That's how I'm built. And right now, I'm telling you that the petition is legally invalid, and filing it anyway will expose the settlement to a formal accord complaint that will take longer to resolve than just letting her stay." Calloway tapped his finger on the desk twice. Then he closed the petition document on his screen. "She needs to keep a lower profile," he said. "That's her call," Soren said, "not ours." He told Kira what had happened. Not everything, not Calloway's word, attached, but the material facts. She listened with her hands flat on her knees, that grounding posture, and when he finished she was quiet for a long moment. "You argued for me," she said. "I argued about paperwork, which is different." "Is it?" He thought about it honestly. Maybe not. Something shifted in her face then. Not softness, exactly. She was not a soft person, and he had not fallen into the mistake of expecting that from her. It was more like a door opening inward, the way a door opens when someone inside has decided that the person knocking is allowed in. "I will tell you something," she said. "A real thing, not a recovered memory, a now thing." "Okay," he said. "I have been counting the days since Gate 7. I do this with every settlement so I know when to leave before they make me leave. I have a number in my head, a threshold. When the resistance reaches a certain level," she made a small gesture with her hand like something dispersing. "I go, I have always gone. It is survival practice. I learned it after the 3rd settlement." She paused. "My threshold number is 11 days. That is how long I give it. I am now at 31 days. He held that number. He understood what she was telling him. "What changed?" he asked. "You carried me," she said. "From the rain, without hesitation. I was watching when I was not quite unconscious. I watched you count 4 seconds and then decide. I had never in 12 settlements, in all the months since the weapon, I had never seen a human count 4 seconds and then decide the way you decided." "What did you see in the 4 seconds?" "Doubt," she said. "Normal doubt. The kind any person has when they find something large and strange and damaged in the rain. And then choice. Not because you had a policy or a protocol, because you decided." She looked at him steadily. "That is a human thing." I had not understood it before. I had thought it was something your species said about itself that was not quite true, but you did it, carried me, without hesitation, which is a contradiction in terms because of the 4 seconds, but it is still true. Soren looked at her, at the amber of her eyes, at the tattered pauldron she still wore over her borrowed clothes every day, the last physical object that had been present for all of it, the plains and the mountain border and the amber sky, and the pack run and Verk counting scars he didn't have. What was the pauldron story? He asked. He hadn't asked before, he'd been waiting for her to offer it. It was Verk's, she said. He gave it to me before the weapon fired. We knew it was coming, there were intelligence reports, though the Collective's council did not act on them fast enough. He gave it to me and said that when you cannot carry everything, you carry what is oldest, and then you begin from there. That's good advice. He was full of good advice, she said. I can describe it to you in detail. I cannot. A familiar pause, the one that meant she was standing at the edge of the divide between knowledge and feeling. I cannot make it feel like his voice. It feels like reading from a text. That is what the weapon did, made everything feel like reading from a text. Does it ever feel like his voice? Soren asked quietly, even for a moment. She thought about it, really thought, the long, serious way she thought about everything. When you ask me to describe it, she said, when you listen the way you listen, for a moment, yes. He didn't say anything. He just stayed there present, the way a witness is present, and let the silence be the kind of silence that holds something rather than empties it. The crisis came in the 6th week. It came because frontier settlements near the exclusion zone were on a 6-week strategic review cycle by the Dominion's monitoring systems, and the Dominion had very specific protocols about Orc presences within those zones, and someone at the regional monitoring hub had flagged Kira's registered location and kicked a formal inquiry to the settlement's administrative channel. Soren found out about it when the inquiry arrived in his queue. Calloway had, apparently, listed Soren as the Orcs' primary point of contact in the settlement's administrative records, which meant the inquiry landed on his desk with a note that said simply, "Handle this." The inquiry was from a Dominion Regional Compliance Officer named Irath San. It requested confirmation of Kira's pack bond status, her potential threat assessment under the Dominion's Orc resettlement criteria, and the part that made Soren's stomach do something cold and unpleasant, a statement of intent regarding whether she intended to remain within the exclusion zone boundary or proceed beyond it. The exclusion zone was the Dominion's unilateral term for the area around former Orc territories. Orcs within it were subject to the Anomaly Weapons Residual Monitoring Network. Orcs who showed signs of recovering pack bond capacity, which the Dominion called reintegration risk, could be flagged for a secondary neural purge, not because they were dangerous, because the Dominion was afraid of 60,000 people who remembered who they were. He didn't tell Kira about the inquiry, not immediately. He spent 2 hours that evening thinking carefully, which was the most important engineering skill he had ever developed, the ability to slow down before doing anything that couldn't be undone. Then he went to Dr. Vesa. If I wanted to get a formal medical assessment that argued Kira's pack bond status represents no reintegration risk, he said, what would that look like? Vesa studied him over her coffee cup, officially or practically. Start with practically. Practically, the Dominion's reintegration criteria are designed to be unfalsifiable. Any behavioral sign of Orc cultural engagement can be flagged. The whole system is built to justify whatever conclusion they've already decided on. She set her cup down. Officially, there's an Article 19 exemption for Orcs who can demonstrate sustained social integration with a non-Orc host community. It requires statements from at least 3 settlement residents who can attest to. She stopped. Soren, how many people in this settlement will actually go on record for her? I'll find them, he said. 3 is the minimum, more is better. He found 7. This surprised him slightly, and then it didn't. There were always more people willing to do the right thing than the visible loudness of the wrong thing doers suggested. The commissary kitchen manager, who had quietly stocked the high-protein packs the day after Kira arrived without being asked. A woman named Petra from the water reclamation crew, who had stopped and spoken to Kira in the main corridor every morning for 2 weeks, comparing notes on the eastern corridors, heating issues in the way that frontier settlement people discuss shared inconveniences as a form of solidarity. An older man named Cass, who had served 2 tours near Orc territory in the second expansion era, and had very specific and well-developed opinions about the Dominion's reintegration criteria. And 4 others, each with their own quiet, unflashy reasons. Soren wrote the administrative response to Arathsan's inquiry personally. He had never written a formal document of this type before, but he had written a great many maintenance reports, and maintenance reports and bureaucratic arguments had more in common than people generally recognized. They were both ultimately about demonstrating, with evidence, that a thing worked correctly and the problem was not where people assumed. He cited Article 14. He cited Article 19. He attached the 7 signed statements. He attached Vessa's medical assessment, which was 3 pages long, and used the phrase, "no measurable reintegration vector," 8 times in a way that was both accurate and very difficult to argue with. He submitted the response at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, because that was when he finished it. Then he went to Kira's quarters and knocked. A pause, then her voice careful, "Yes." "It's Soren, there's something I need to tell you. I should have told you earlier. I'm sorry I didn't." He told her about the inquiry, all of it. The Dominion monitoring flag, the reintegration criteria, the secondary purge risk, the response he'd submitted, the 7 people who had signed statements. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You did all this tonight." "Started on it 2 days ago," he said. "Tonight I finished." "You should have told me," she said. Not angry. Something harder than angry, the voice of someone who has been protected without consent before and knows what it costs. "Yes," he said, "I should have. I wanted to fix it first. That was wrong. You had the right to know even when it wasn't fixed yet." Another silence. He waited. "How many people signed?" she asked. 7. He heard her exhale, a long, slow sound. "In the 3rd settlement," she said, "the one where I learned the 11-day threshold, there was a man who saw me in the corridor. I was having an episode. You know what I mean by that. When the disconnect gets very bad and the memories feel entirely like someone else's life, and I am standing in my own body as a stranger." She paused. He walked past, not because he was cruel, because he did not know what to do, and doing nothing is easier than doing something wrong. "Yes," Soren said. "You do not do nothing," she said. "That is, I do not have the standard word for what that is." "What's the Orc word?" A pause. Then she said it, the sound that her name had been descended from, low and sustained, but differently, directed differently. "What does it mean?" he asked. "There is not a direct translation," she said slowly. "Something like the one who holds the thread of a thing, when someone else cannot hold it, not a savior, not a hero. Just the one who holds the thread." He leaned against the wall outside her door in the quiet of the eastern corridor, with its inadequate insulation and its cold seeping through from outside, and he thought about that. "I can do that," he said. "I know," she said. The Dominion's response to his administrative filing came back 16 days later. It was from a compliance review board rather than Arathsan personally, which Soren took as a positive sign, and it acknowledged receipt of the Article 19 filing and the supporting documentation, and stated that the inquiry had been reclassified pending full review, which was bureaucratic language for "we are going to take this seriously, and in the meantime we are not going to act." It wasn't a victory, it was a pause. But pauses were real things. Pauses could become permanent if you kept the thread held. On the evening the response came through, Soren found Kira in the eastern corridor, standing at one of the narrow external-facing windows that looked out over the Badlands toward the exclusion zone. The rain had come back. It was the season for it now, long, slow sheets of it that turned the Meridian Flats into a mirror. She was standing with her arms loose at her sides, her hands slightly open, and she had taken the pauldron off for once and held it in her left hand, and she was looking east. He stood beside her. "I remember the first time I led the pack run," she said without preamble. "I was 23, which is young. Verk said I was ready before I believed it. The others ran behind me and I could feel them, actually feel them, the way you feel the ground under your feet. And I set the pace and everything moved together and it was." She stopped. "It was," she said again. Soren waited. "For a moment just now," she said, "it felt like his voice." She wasn't looking at him. She was looking east at the rain, not the text, his voice. He didn't say anything. He just stood there beside her and looked east with her at the rain falling on the Meridian Flats, and the light from the settlement's exterior lamps turned the rain into something that might have been amber if you were willing to imagine it. After a while she said, "I think I am not going to hit my threshold." "Good," he said. "I will not make promises about the future. The Dominion's review could change everything. The Settlement Council is still unhappy. Calloway is cautious by nature." "I know," he said. "But I think," she stopped, started again. "In pack culture there is a thing you do when you are building a new bond. You do not declare it. You do not perform it. You simply act as if it is already true, and you do this consistently, and after enough time it becomes true because the acting has made it so." She turned and looked at him. "I think we have been doing that." He met her eyes, amber, the exact shade of the Verada Plains sky in the late afternoon light, the one she described in the 20 minutes between the lowlands and the mountains. "How long?" he asked. She thought about it. "Since Gate 7, she said. He nodded. The formal settlement integration request, when Soren filed it with the IRB 3 weeks later, listed Kira as a long-term resident candidate with documented community integration under Article 19, 7 supporting character attestations, 1 full medical clearance from a certified settlement physician, and 1 administrative sponsor, which was Soren. The form asked him to describe his relationship to the candidate in 25 words or fewer. He sat at his desk for about 4 minutes, which was a long time for a maintenance engineer who prided himself on efficient documentation. Then he wrote, "She came through my gate in the rain. I carried her. We have been building a bond since then. She is mine to hold the thread for." It was 27 words. He counted twice and then submitted it anyway. The IRB response took 43 days. 43 days during which the settlement continued its routines, and Calloway continued being cautious, and the Eastern Corridor insulation continued to be inadequate, and Kira continued borrowing the largest available clothes from the communal store and restrapping Verk's pauldron over them every morning. She started helping in the Eastern kitchen 3 shifts per week. The kitchen manager had asked, directly and without drama, and Kira had said yes, and they had developed a companionable working relationship based largely on shared opinions about protein-to-carbohydrate ratios and the correct amount of heat for the morning grain porridge. She stopped counting days. She mentioned this to Soren one evening without making a large thing of it, just a small noting, the way you note when weather has changed. He started teaching her the maintenance circuits. This had begun as a practical matter. She had strong observational instincts and an engineer's native habit of looking at how things fit together, and on the evenings when he ran the perimeter check she had taken to walking with him, and at some point the walking had become learning. She was excellent with the reactive barrier diagnostics. Her pattern recognition was faster than his, which he told her without jealousy, because jealousy about someone's competence had always seemed to him like a waste of perfectly good observation. She showed him the pack run once. Not a full run. There was only the two of them, and she explained that the real thing required a minimum of 8 for the resonance to work properly. But she showed him the footwork, the way the pace was set and held, the slight forward lean that communicated readiness to the people behind you. She moved through the eastern corridor in the early morning when it was empty, and he followed, learning the rhythm, and for a few seconds he felt what she meant about feeling the ground, the synchrony, the sense of being continuous with something larger. "You are slow," she told him, "but consistent." "I'm a maintenance engineer," he said. "Consistent is what we do." On the 43rd day, the IRB response came through, and the response was approval. Long-term resident status. Provisional for 24 months, then permanent review eligible. Soren read it twice in his quarters and then went to find her. She was in the eastern kitchen. It was morning. She was at the grain station, handling the morning porridge with the focus and attention she brought to everything, and the kitchen manager was at the opposite counter doing prep work. And the kitchen smelled like hot grain and the particular steam that came off the settlement's water reclamation units on cold mornings, which Soren had always found unexpectedly comforting even though it was a completely industrial smell with no particular aesthetic merit. He handed her the IRB approval document on his handheld. She read it, he watched her read it. The careful, whole-body attention she gave to things she was taking seriously, her hands very still. When she looked up, her eyes were the color of the late afternoon Verada sky, and she said, in a voice that was level and even and had something underneath it that was not level and not even at all, 24 months provisional. Then permanent review eligible, he said. Yes, a pause, and you are listed as administrative sponsor for the duration. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. Outside the kitchen, the settlement was coming online for the day, the drone of equipment, the clatter of the eastern processing units, the indifferent hum of a place going about its routines. The same sounds as every morning. But sounds can be the same and mean different things, depending on what you are standing inside of when you hear them. Kira put down the stirring implement she'd been holding and placed both palms flat on the counter, fingers spread. The grounding gesture, but it was different this time. She wasn't dispersing emotion. She was receiving it. In pack culture, she said carefully, when a bond becomes real, when it has been acted as if true long enough to actually become true, you witness it. You say it aloud to someone who will hold it. I'm listening, Soren said. She looked at him. I am Kira of the Verada Keth, she said, and her voice did something that his standard hearing could not quite parse. It had a resonance underneath it, a subtone, something that his chest felt before his ears did. I ran the dawn pace for 3 years. I knew the amber sky between the lowlands and the mountains. I knew Verk. These things were mine. I am saying them to you so that they are witnessed, so they are real. The kitchen manager had gone very still at the opposite counter. A third person, a witness, Soren registered vaguely. Good, good. I hear you, Soren said, Kira of the Verada Keth. The dawn pace was yours, the sky was yours, Verk was yours. He paused. He thought about what else she'd told him, all of it, the things she'd handed over piece by piece over 31 days and then more days after. The walk to gate 7 through 4 days of Badlands was yours, the 11-day threshold, the choosing not to hit it, the pauldron, all of it was yours. I heard all of it. It's witnessed. She stood there for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, not in standard, the word that meant the one who holds the thread. And she said it the way you say a name. He didn't have the vocal range to answer her in kind. But he nodded, once, the way a person nods when something that has been becoming true for a long time has finally arrived at the moment of being simply true. Outside, the rain had stopped. The eastern corridor light, coming through the narrow external windows, was turning the puddles on the meridian flats into something that was, if you were standing in the right place, an almost exact shade of amber. The 44th morning. He walked the perimeter and she walked beside him, and they moved at the same pace without speaking, consistent and synchronized. The thread held between them without anyone needing to name it again. The gate was behind them. The Badlands stretched ahead. The sky was amber at the edges where the light came through. It was enough. It was, in the precise and full and unremarkable sense, enough. There were things that changed slowly and things that changed all at once, and the distinction mattered less than people thought, because the slow changes were just the fast ones seen from far enough away. Kira's standard improved in the way that language improves when you stop being careful with it and start just using it. The way a borrowed coat stops feeling borrowed when you've worn it through enough weather that it has shaped itself to you. She developed preferences. This was, Soren recognized, a kind of recovery, though not the kind that got reported in IRB documents. She preferred the morning shift in the eastern kitchen to the afternoon shift, because the morning light through the processing bay windows came in at an angle that turned the steam from the grain vats into something she said reminded her, faintly, of the Verada mountain fog. She preferred the eastern corridor to the western for the same reason. She preferred sitting facing the external windows. She had a preference about the temperature of her water that was slightly warmer than the standard commissary setting, and the kitchen manager had adjusted the dispenser without being asked, which was the kind of small human gesture that Soren had started noticing more since Kira had pointed out that he made them. "You do this," she told him once, watching him restack the supply crates in the maintenance bay to put the items she used most within her reach, which he had done without thinking about it. "Adjust things for people, preemptively." "You noticed," he said. "I have been noticing for a while," she said. "At first I thought it was your job, then I thought it was your nature, then I thought," she paused. "In pack culture, the one who sets the pace in the pack run does not just run faster. They feel where everyone is and they make the path easier before the others need to ask. You do this." "I'm not setting your pace," he said. "That's yours." "No," she agreed, "but you make the path easier, that is its own thing." The IRB provisional period began its second year. The Dominion's reintegration review remained reclassified, which in the bureaucratic language of galactic governance meant that no one had found a reason to escalate, and no one particularly wanted to. Irathsan had apparently moved to a different compliance assignment. The regional monitoring hub's interest in Verada 9 had gone dormant. Soren kept his copies of all the filings organized in a folder. He labeled KIRA Accord in a naming convention so unmysterious that Calloway, who occasionally needed to consult the settlement's administrative records, had once looked at it and said absolutely nothing, which was its own kind of acknowledgement. The settlement's social composition shifted over those months the way frontier settlements shift, which is to say with the organic untidiness of actual human, and now orc life. People left. New people came through. The 3 men and 1 woman from the commissary incident cycled out on the standard 6-month labor contract and were replaced by 4 others who had no prior associations and no particular positions. Petra from Water Reclamation got promoted to Eastern Corridor team lead and started collaborating with Kira on the heating panel installations, which had finally gotten budget approval after Soren had submitted the same materials request for the 7th time with increasingly pointed annotation. The kitchen manager's name was Rael, and Soren had somehow never asked this in 6 months, and when he finally did ask, Rael told him in the tone of someone who had noticed the gap and found it endearing rather than rude. Kira told him that she had started dreaming in something other than still photographs. "What is it now?" he asked. "Motion," she said. "Not pack song, not yet, maybe not ever, but motion." A pause, figures running, the dawn light, not specific enough to be a real memory but warm. The way a memory feels when it is still connected to the person it belongs to. She looked at him. "I think I am learning to feel things again. A new way, not the old way. The old way is gone, but—" "A new one," he said. "A new one," she said. Yes. She had begun, quietly and without announcement, to teach him Orc. Not the whole language. Orc languages were not learned in 6 months by adult humans, and she was realistic about this, but the structural elements, the logic underlying the phonology, the things that would let him understand even if he couldn't speak. It was a reciprocal arrangement, though she never framed it that way. He taught her engineering principles, and she taught him how a language could carry an entire cosmology inside its grammar. And they met somewhere in the middle of all of it in the long evenings after their respective shifts, in the eastern corridor with its repaired insulation panels and its amber-angled light, two people building a shared vocabulary that was neither his nor hers but theirs. He was 41 years old. He had spent 20 years keeping things working on frontier settlements, fixing the infrastructure that made it possible for human beings to survive in places that weren't built for them. And he had been good at it, and it had been enough, and he had not previously thought very hard about whether it would remain enough. She made him think about it, not by asking, by being the kind of person whose presence reframes what you thought you already understood about yourself. Cass, the older man who had signed the Article 19 statement, and who had opinions about the Dominion that could be summarized as deeply unfavorable, found Soren in the maintenance bay one afternoon and said without preamble, "You're going to apply for permanent co-residency, aren't you? When the 2 years are up." "That's a decision for both of us," Soren said. "Right," Cass said. "I'm asking because I want to know if I should update my witness statement." "Give it 3 months," Soren said. 3 months later, he asked her. Not in a dramatic way. There was no particular setting chosen for it, no specific staging. They were doing the perimeter check, their perimeter check now. It had been their perimeter check for over a year, and they were at the eastern point, at Gate 7, and the rain was coming down again because it was the season again, and the seasons didn't stop for anything. She was running the barrier diagnostic, and he was logging the power draw, and neither of them was saying anything. Just moving through the work the way you move through work, when you've done it together enough times that the coordination is automatic. He said, "I want to apply for permanent co-residency when your provisional period closes. If you do." She kept running the diagnostic. Her hands didn't stop. "That is a very administrative way to ask a thing like that," she said. "I'm a maintenance engineer," he said. "Administrative is how I come." A pause. The rain fell. The barrier hummed. The diagnostic readout completed. She looked at it, noted the values, and then straightened and looked at him with the amber of her eyes in the gray rain light. "Yes," she said. "I do." The application, when they filed it jointly the following spring, was 19 pages of documentation. Calloway signed the administrative endorsement without comment, which was the closest thing to approval he had ever offered and which Soren accepted in the spirit it was intended. Vesa provided a revised medical assessment. Cass updated his statement. Petra added 1. Rael added 1. 11 people had signed this time without being asked at all, which was 11 more than the Dominion's monitoring protocol had predicted for a frontier settlement Orc integration case. The IRB approved the permanent residency in 62 days. They were both running the morning perimeter when the notification came through on Soren's handheld. He read it, handed the device to Kira, and she read it and said nothing for a while. The sun was coming up over the Meridian Flats, the light catching the standing water from the night's rain, and the angle of it turned everything to amber for exactly the 20 minutes between the lowlands and the horizon. She took his hand. Not dramatically, not as a declaration. The way you take someone's hand when the words that would fit the moment don't exist in any of the languages you share. He held it. They walked the last kilometer of the perimeter in the amber light, the gate behind them, the Badlands open ahead, the settlement humming into its morning routines. Gate 7 stood open in the rain-cleaned air. He had never fixed the mechanism that made it stick slightly when the humidity was high, because some things you leave as they are. some small imperfections in the infrastructure of a life that serve as reminders of how things began. The amber held for the full 20 minutes, long enough.